Hi, everybody. Sorry we're running a little bit late today. It's been a technical wonkiness. I'm not sure what happened between Monday's Chaos Inc. episode and tonight, but my computer decided it hated me, and specifically it hated me when I was running. So normally we run all of the video feeds through Discord, and then I pipe them back out to Streamlabs, and for whatever reason, it decided not to work today, and it was like killing runtime. So if we drop suddenly, I apologize. We're going to try and get through the show. We've got some great topics for you tonight. So welcome back to Identico After Dark. This is the show where we talk about gaming and music and podcasts and all kinds of fun stuff. We have a great panel tonight. First, a familiar face who you all know, Michael, who plays the great character Maxie on Chaos Inc.
Evening, everybody. Glad to be back.
So, and also joining us tonight, we have Damian. Damian is one of the DMs who runs our living campaign at Gamer7 Seattle, which I think we're up to like 30-ish players now. We've got like 4 or 5 DMs. It's a huge interconnected campaign. Damian also has been running an actual play podcast for quite a long time, and wanted to get Damian in here to talk about kind of some of the stuff about the state of D&D and where he sees the whole ecosystem going. So that's where we're going to kick off. Damian, say hi.
Hey, thanks for having me on tonight, Alex. It was we've chatted about having me on for a while now, so it was nice we were able to make this work tonight.
I'm very glad we're able to make this work tonight. So let's start our rundown right at the top. So this week, they announced the title of the Dungeons & Dragons movie. And the title of the movie, here, I'm going to pull it up right now. The title that they have announced is the 2022 one. It is Honor Among Thieves.
Mm-hmm.
So Dungeons & Dragons Honor
That's
Among
not
Thieves.
all we know.
That's not all we know.
Not all we know.
Not all we know. So that the cast right now is being headlined by Chris Pine. We also have Zoe Saldana and a few other people in this film. It's scheduled to come out next year. Not Zoe Saldana, Michelle Rodriguez from Fast and Furious. Also appearing is Justice Smith and Hugh Grant. Because I know when I think of Dungeons & Dragons, I think of Hugh Grant. Initial thoughts. Damian, let's kick off with you. What are your thoughts about them trying to make another D&D movie?
So like my initial thoughts are my ignorance in the movie scene shows because I recognize the name Chris Pine, and that's about the end of that. And as for them making a D&D movie, I've seen some takes since this has all been announced and everything, and I can kind of agree with them that they're doing D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, the movie, specifically so that they can use the lore behind the IP.
So, Michael, what are your initial thoughts? And then we'll kind of swing around to this.
All right. Well, I'm sure, like you, Alex, I'm sure you've also lived through the existing D&D movies.
Oh, yes.
There are more than one.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I believe there were 2. I believe there were 3. Sorry, there was the original release, and then I believe there were 2 direct to DVD sequels. Is that correct?
I know of Jeremy Irons, and that's it.
Yep.
Yeah. So, like you, I was excited when I heard that they were filming a D&D movie, and I was excited to find
We're losing.
out that Jeremy Irons was going to be in it, the main characters, right? I don't remember anything about that movie because it was so horrible. That being said, I've always been of the mindset that, you know what? Go ahead and take another shot. Like, the worst you can do has already been made.
Yeah.
The
Are
original D
are
and D
we
movie was
are we sure about that?
yeah, yeah. I mean, honestly, the worst, like honestly, is I saw the cast list, and of course, they've been very hush hush about the story itself.
Yep.
I know, however, from what little I researched on this, they are already planning like a television spin-off series is already like in the works based on this movie. There are a number of like projects that they are basing off of this movie to tie into the D&D universe, not just from a gaming perspective, but also across some of their other IPs. I know that they're
Oh,
planning a plugin for the
Oh,
Neverwinter,
magic set.
a magic, probably a magic set. I know they're planning on a tie-in for the Neverwinter MMO.
so
Um,
here's my question. I guess
I'm all for it. So like to give you the straight answer, I'm all for it. Like, you know what? Go for it. Have fun. As long as it's entertaining, like that's all I really need it to be. I'm not looking for I can tell my own D&D stories in my own time with my friends. Like just give me an entertaining story and like make it decent
so.
and I'm good.
Hold on to that last thought. Here's
Yeah.
my fear. Okay, um, Chris Pine is good in what Chris Pine is good in, right? I thought he made an okay Captain Kirk in that Star Trek reboot that Abrams did. I thought he was good in Wonder Woman, right? Um, Here's my fear, and this is something Mal and I talked about when this movie was first announced. And y'all can clip this if you'd like. This is my prediction, and this is what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid they're gonna Jumanji this shit. That's what I think this is gonna be, and that scares me a little bit. That bit worked for Jumanji, taking the teenage kids and putting them in the body of Jack Black and Dwayne the Rock Johnson, and that bit works for kind of that genre. If that's what they do with the Dungeons and Dragons movie, I'm a little worried that it's going to turn into let's make fun of kids who play D&D.
I will go on record myself as saying that the current, I believe the current crew that's running Wizards and the current people behind the production of this film know better than to do that.
I think Wizards
To
knows,
turn it into a joke.
I think Wizards knows better. I don't know how much creative control they signed away to who's the production company? Paramount. I don't know what kind of creative control they've signed away to Paramount. I don't know what the structure of that deal is. So again, I agree with you. I don't think that this is the case. But let's look at the head screenwriter of this film. He wrote Good Morning Miami, Four Kings, and The New Adventures of Old Christine. He's a comedy writer. He did write Spider-Man Homecoming, but he also wrote Horrible Bosses.
Which, I would go so far as to say Homecoming was a fantastic movie.
Homecoming was a fantastic movie.
And I will go on record as saying I thoroughly enjoyed Horrible Bosses.
Yes.
Now, given again, black comedy and a superhero movie with comedic bits, but honestly, if the D&D movie comes off even half as good as Spider-Man Homecoming, I'm perfectly happy with that.
Damian, what do you think?
On that comedy aspect, have either of you guys watched Legends of Vox Machina yet?
I've
Or
watched
have any
pieces.
interest in it?
I have never partaken in a Critical Role production.
So, while I have some issues with the way that the story was told through that, Critical Role has a bunch of comedy in it, and there were definitely elements of comedy in Legends of Vox Machina that I could see working well, having a comedy writer behind it, especially since they have ties to Spider-Man as well. So I'm thinking hopefully the writer behind it is going to be putting more of a like super, I mean, at the end of the day, D&D is like fantasy superhero fantasies.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So I could see that translating well just from that aspect. And I think a lot of us with experience in tabletop games are familiar with the comedy that happens at the table. And that, I think, kind of my hope for it is that it doesn't try to take itself too seriously while still being a well-produced fantasy movie.
And see,
I would agree with that, Damian. I mean, as a viewer and as a D&D player and as someone who enjoys Dungeons and Dragons, I'm not looking for Lord of the Rings. That's not the experience I want from a D&D movie, honestly.
no, the experience I'd like is, and I don't know if you, I mean, we're going to go dig deep here.
All right.
Do you remember the movie Dragonheart?
Yeah, Sean Connery.
Right? Dennis Quaid.
Mm-hmm.
Like, kind of like obviously very dated special effects at this point aside. That's kind of what I want out of a D&D movie. Right? And that's why, again, I think that if they try and Jumanji this up, where it's 4 kids playing D&D in a basement and then suddenly they get sucked into D&D world, I think it turns into not funny in the way that you're thinking of and not take it too seriously, but I think it turns into a parody of what D&D is.
See, and I think that can actually be done well, specifically because of something I had seen years ago. I actually had to look it up again when we were decided we were going to talk about this. Is there was a short film, like indie film, done. It looks like it was put out in early 2020 called Fantopia. That was basically that take. And even though I don't think it would do well as a big screen movie, I'd love to see a higher production run of something like that, because this short film is focused on the gameplay, like the story happening in the game universe, but pulls out to the kids around the table and does it in a very, it's not doing it in a way to make fun of it. In fact, the story behind it's actually kind of serious and has some dark turns to it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a short film that I remembered seeing forever ago that I think did that really well. Of if they wanted to truly make a Dungeons and Dragons movie, not a movie set in Dungeons and Dragons, I think that would be the way to do it. I just don't think that that would be a big box office thing that they'd put money behind, so I don't expect it to be like that.
So what do we think? I mean, do we think that they're going to do we think they're going to set it in an existing campaign setting? Are we just going to see some more Forgotten Realms? Obviously, since 5th edition has come out, D&D has leaned extremely heavily into Forgotten Realms.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, that's the primary. We've had some other announcements recently. It looks like Dragonlance and Dark Sun are coming back. But Forgotten Realms has been the standard.
No, Dragonlance and Spelljammer.
Oh, sorry, Spelljammer. You're right.
Dark Sun has still not been announced. That there are people that are champing at the bit for it, but that's a whole nother discussion.
Yes, we might touch on that one later. Do we think they do Forgotten Realms? Are they going to invent something new? Like, what would you like to see out of this?
Damian?
I mean, I've kind of given what I'd like to see out of it. I just don't think that's going to happen. I think that realistically this is going to be a high fantasy set in the Forgotten Realms, and that is why they are running it under the Dungeons and Dragons banner, because that's going to immediately bring IP and name recognition to it, whereas simply calling it something, Forgotten Realms something or other, wouldn't have the same pull as, oh no, that's the Dungeons and Dragons movie. like everyone
Oh.
knows what Dungeons and Dragons is, that if you said, hey, yeah, it's a movie set in the Forgotten Realms, there are D&D players that are going to look at you and go, yeah, what's that?
I wouldn't be surprised if they did not give it a concrete setting, to avoid to avoid the inevitable judgment that it's going to face to people that are fans of those settings, right? If you set it in the Forgotten Realms and you don't take advantage of all the cool things about the Forgotten Realms, then people are just going to complain about that. But if you make it a generic fantasy, if you make it a non-named fantasy setting, it could be the Forgotten Realms, but as long as you're not calling it the Forgotten Realms, there's less judgment from people. Although I do believe that it makes more sense for them to pick one of their campaign worlds to use. Just again, as Damian said, from a tie-in perspective, it makes more sense. They've got all this lore and IP to tuck into this, depending on how much they want to do, right? But I don't know. I'm fine with them using Forgotten Realms as long as they tell me a good story. That's really at the end of the day, I'm pretty easy as far as movies go. I'm not really as picky as I used to be in my youth. I really just want to be entertained.
Mm-hmm.
And I want a good story, and I'm willing to look plot holes as long as I can't drive a truck through them.
I just want to see a good, well-produced fantasy movie at this point.
Yeah.
So we think we're
And that definitely evokes D&D. Like, I also think of, and some of you might remember this movie, In the Name of the King.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the movie based on the Dungeon Siege franchise. And if you had never told me that movie was based on the Dungeon Siege franchise, I would never know.
So do you almost
because that movie had absolutely nothing to do, didn't really use the game world or anything about the game world at all. However, it was a Jason Statham movie, and I forever am a fan of Jason Statham, so I like that movie. But yeah, I mean, as long as if you're calling it a Dungeons and Dragons movie, you gotta make sure that it's using parts of the IP and that it's familiar to the people that are coming to see it because it's Dungeons and Dragons.
So, and let me pose this question a different way then. Not so much what do you want to see. What would you say would turn it from, and I'll use Dragonheart as my example, right? Dragonheart, very much a generic run-of-the-mill high fantasy movie. What changes this in your mind from run-of-the-mill generic high fantasy movie to, yes, this needed to be titled Dungeons and Dragons?
I mean, honestly, if you make reference to a number of the Dungeons and Dragons deities, if we see Tiamat or any other named dragon in a form that is familiar and not too horribly mutilated by the production process,
Maybe a gelatinous
Name-
cube.
Feathers on your dragon.
yeah, named characters. I mean, familiar characters in whatever setting they decide to use, right?
So Drist.
I mean, hopefully not, but again, I'm drawing a blank now, of course, with familiar characters.
Elminster, Fizzban. We've got
Exactly. Thank you.
Volo,
Like if Elminster, Volo, if those types of characters make an appearance, right? Mordenkainen. If you get, characters that are named and that are used in the story to tell the story, right? But then also they are there as a wink to the audience that knows these characters, and if those characters are written to be like those characters are presented in lore. Right? If you have Volo as this kind, being played by someone who will play a very, outrageous bard with wonderful costuming and,
see, that's where we can use Hugh Grant.
So I honestly, I'm excited about it. I don't see it as a negative. I mean, even if it's bad, it'll just be another bad movie, It'll be another bad D&D movie, which again, we don't need another bad D&D movie, but it's not like we can't. There's not another room for another one.
I've been disappointed before. I still
Yeah.
cite Aragon as one of the
Oh,
movies
yeah.
I was most excited for, and then utterly disappointed by when it came out.
I just fell down on that one. That is for certain. Does this open up opportunity for other similar IPs? Do you think we see a run on maybe we'll start making tabletop RPG settings into movies? Are we going to see a Shadowrun movie?
I mean, I honestly wish that was already a thing.
Well, I mean, we had that Netflix thing with Will Smith, which was basically Shadowrun.
I mean, yeah, Bright, yeah, Bright was a pretty close analog. Well,
add a little bit of cyberpunkiness and a dragon, and you've pretty much got Shadowrun right there. Does this open it up?
I mean, I don't know.
It
What do you think,
depends.
Damian?
I think it really depends on how they do it and then how it's received. Because depending on how they do it, being based in tabletop RPGs isn't going to really matter. Because at the end of the day, if they do it and they don't lean on the world and everything built from the tabletop RPG, then it's just another fantasy movie that's out there. But if they do lean in on the tabletop aspect and all of the lore and world building that's already happened because of how long the IP's been around, I could see, especially because I know that there's a lot of love for it, Pathfinder coming through with something set in Golarion. I know that there is a lot of lore, possibly even more well thought out than we have for the Forgotten Realms for Golarion. And at that point, it's going to be similar yet different than a movie based on traditional fantasy books. Like, I think the tabletop roleplay aspect of it is probably going to be the least important part of everything that comes out with this movie.
So, yeah, I'm just wondering because, like, I would say that more so often than novels, tabletop RPGs have such rich world building, right? Conceptually. And there's so much you can do with them that I would love to see them adapted more into prestige television and movies. Again, my fear is, again, it's kind of like video game movies, right? Nobody's managed to really crack the code on video game movies yet, and making a really, really, really good one. It's honestly the closest they've probably come is Sonic the Hedgehog, which I thought was just wonderful.
You didn't like the Monster Hunter movie?
God. So I don't.
I'm not going to bite on that, Damian.
I don't want to see them mess this up because I see this as doing, and this is where we'll kind of transition into kind of the wider implications. If this is done right and does well, look, we know that Hollywood is a copycat industry, right? I could see other studios, because you're obviously not going to be able to buy away the D&D brand from Paramount, but I could see other studios going, hey, what else is out there? And really being able to find some of these tabletop RPGs that could use a boost in the market, that might actually start leveling the playing field a little bit more between all the tabletop RPGs, right? It might help break the D&D, like, oligopoly that exists right now. And that's my hope. And that's why I'm going to be super frustrated, not just because I don't want to see a parody of tabletop RPG players, but I think they will have missed an opportunity to, shine a light on other tabletop RPGs, because again, I think this will cause studios to start looking at other IPs.
I think I think what you're going to see is if this movie does well, we'll likely see movie studios at least considering and bringing other projects to bear, maybe from role playing games, correct? I think what you're really going to look at more, and I think you already touched on it, is people are already studios, especially all the private streaming labels, are turning to favored novel series to populate their shows now, right? That's become the last 5 years. If you have a major book series out, chances are you're getting a TV show from it. Somebody's making a TV show of that book series,
Mm-hmm.
whatever streaming studio that might be. I feel like that's actually the best place, and you mentioned it, but I think that's the best place that we could hope that the tabletop IPs end up is, again, prestige television in a setting that is meant to tell long form stories or anthology stories in a much better form than movies. Movies are great for what movies are, but for the most part, anytime somebody makes a movie out of a property that you like, there's very few times that, and of course there are exceptions, but oftentimes if you're going to see a movie based on a book that you love, you're going to leave that movie, and most of the time you're like, man, they left out so much.
I wish they had done this.
Yeah, I wish they had done this.
that.
I wish I wanted to see this. They didn't do this very well. Because, again, the book lets you, that creativeness in the book lets you tell the story in your mind the way you want to, and no television show can live up to that. No movie can live up to that. But at least a television show or prestige television has that opportunity to tell long form story over, over 10 episodes, over 10 hours. Yeah. Versus a, at max a 2.5 to 3 hour movie that is going to have to cram parts of the story in or excise them all together to make the runtime.
And that kind of leads us into another thing that was in the rundown, which is, and we'll start with Damian here. Do you think movies are the best IP or the best medium to tell these types of stories? Or would Dungeons and Dragons have been better served as a TV series and not a film?
I'd say movies pretty much not at all. I am fully on board that for a lot of these deeper stories, the basically the Game of Thrones treatment is what does best. Having these premium long running TV shows that allow you to break out that story into a 10 or 12 hour runtime. I mean, kind of like, it's not based in tabletop, but like what we're getting with The Witcher is, I think we're getting a lot more by having it in episodic format than by having it in movie format, or everything that's going on through Mandalorian and all of the Star Wars series that are being done on Disney Plus now. I think there's a reason that Disney Plus is leaning so much more on these being long running episodic content instead of, it's Disney. If they thought this story could work in movie form, they would do it in movie form.
Well, and movies are a bigger gamble. At the end of the day, when you look at production costs for even like a lower budget movie, and granted, television episodes, especially for a series like Mandalorian or the Disney Plus series, right, or Witcher, or the Lord of the Rings series that's coming on Amazon, or the Wheel of Time series, those production costs for those episodes are high.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at like $10 and $15 million an episode, aren't we?
Correct. But you're also looking at a protracted production time, and you have, you have a guarantee for so many episodes for a full season, right? Especially when you get a show that's picked up, versus a movie that you are essentially running a risk, right? You have to find the perfect drop time for that movie in the year, right? When is that movie? What am I putting that movie up against? What is it gonna be competing against when it gets released? What's the potential audience for that movie? And with a movie, you really do have to go, for the most part, widest common denominator, right? But with, for example, Disney, doing a show that's about the Mandalorian, they're like, hey, guess what? We know Star Wars fans. We got them on lock. We're gonna make this movie. We're gonna make the show for Star Wars fans, and we're going to make it accessible to people that are maybe not necessarily familiar with everything in the widest Star Wars universe.
Well, and I
So
think
we're gonna tell a story that everybody can watch, but those people that are bigger fans are really gonna get a lot out of.
well, and I think Marvel and Moon Knight really is an even better example of that.
Yeah,
because
no, you're absolutely right.
they took a character that is extremely obscure unless you're a big comics nerd, right? Unless you're really into comic books, you probably have never heard of Moon Knight.
Nope.
And you took a character that is extremely obscure, and you got, first off, one of the premier actors in Hollywood today to sign on to this project, right, in Oscar Isaac. But furthermore, they did what I don't think you can do in a film, and that is they have really they were treading a fine line, because a big part of Moon Knight's character is his mental illness. And they could have very easily screwed that up. And I think if they would have tried to shoehorn the character of Moon Knight into even like a 2.5 hour, which is kind of where Marvel's like runtime limit is, I think they would have messed it up. But by giving it a 6-episode run, a 50-minute episode, so you're going to get around 5 hours and call it 5.5 hours of screen time, they gave it room to breathe. And I think that's a better situation. So, I think that's just the way that they need to be running these things going forward. So hopefully, again, my hope is that the D&D movie will... Look, I would love nothing more than for it to be great and for it to get studios to start looking at... Because like Michael said a few minutes ago, if you've written a moderately successful novel series like Altered Carbon, right, you're going to get a TV deal, right? Because they're begging for IP. And I think that the tabletop RPG market is an untapped resource. By the way, if anyone would like to option the rights for Identico, I know Mallo and I would be happy to crap you out a 10-episode season.
I got a $5 on me.
I'm just saying, right? Warner Brothers, Disney, hey, Warner, you have some new owners. You could use some new IP.
Don't go looking for MGM to make any more movies anytime soon.
I mean, they're Amazon now, so.
Well, I don't know if you saw, Amazon apparently has done some major layoffs on the MGM side.
I've heard that. Yeah. And we'll get to corporate mergers here in a little bit.
Yeah, of course.
This is.
I want to just call out real quick. BitPlayer made a good point about going back to corporate vision versus in the chat. BitPlayer, thank you. Made a point about going back to corporate vision versus of what sells versus what the player and the customer want. And I think that goes back to, I mentioned in the chat too, but I think that goes back to what we talked about previously, in that Wizards knows right now that D&D is in the middle of like a cultural zeitgeist.
Mm-hmm.
It's like literally D&D could barely get any bigger than it is right now. Really, in terms of
as big as it is,
it's never been as big as it is now, and
No.
it certainly wasn't this big when the original movie was released.
No, dear God, no.
Not remotely. So I feel like that, combined with the fact that they had this abysmal failure earlier regarding the IP, I really do think that they are going to really hedge their bets to try to make this the best received movie they can make it to be a D&D product, right? To have the D&D name. And I feel like when you look at the cast that they've selected, and again, I know, Damian, you weren't familiar with a couple of the people there. I mean, some of the people in the cast are pretty well known for some of the smaller TV shows and like more indie stuff that they've done. Chris Pine will get butts in seats, and he's...
Will he? I mean, the thing is that, and I would argue, and I've heard a couple of the movie people that I follow argue this recently, is that the era of the movie star, as far as if we put this person in a movie, people will come, is effectively over, right? There are very few stars who you can be like, we put this guy in this movie, people will show up.
I
don't think Chris Pine's one of those.
If I had to make a bet here, I'm gonna put this out here, and again, you can clip this and ding me later if this isn't true. Chris Pine is going to be playing the hero that either gets killed or fails. I feel like this is going to be a Samuel L. Jackson in Deep Blue Sea type of thing, where his name is on the marquee and he's listed as one of the stars, but I think the younger people that you're seeing in the cast are going to be the stars of the film, and Chris Pine is going to be either the hero they have to rescue, or kind of like, maybe even if you think about it, like a Val Kilmer, Mad Mardigan type, where the heroes are in the midst of their adventure, the actual heroes, and this is the guy that they stumble across that kind of ends up just joining the party as.
So see, this is where I'm gonna go. This, and y'all, again, chat, you can clip this too. Here's where I think they're rolling with this, right? And it was when I heard the tagline title, that was what actually started concerning me again, the Honor Among Thieves thing, and I'm like, okay, so Chris Pine is the thief with a heart of gold, who is gonna start out the movie as the rakish, like, rogue, right? There's his character class, right? And over the course of the film, Michelle Rodriguez will convert him and convince him to become a hero. And if that's the story, I'm going to be like a little disappointed.
I don't think they're going to go that generic with it. I honestly do, because of the way that the modern D&D brand focuses on, anybody can be the hero. Like, that's kind of a big focus of the brand as a whole. And I really do feel like they're going to take those younger characters, those younger people, and those people are going to be the focus of this story. And the names that you're seeing, that Chris Pine and Michelle Rodriguez, they're going to be the not the central characters. They're not going to be the focus. They're going to be characters that help these burgeoning heroes on their quest, or get in the way.
Say that again.
What?
Go ahead, Damian.
It's like almost like the mentor types.
Yeah, mentors, or again, like, kind of incidentals. They could, to be honest, they could be extended cameos for the most part. Like, I really do feel like they're going to put the focus on the youths in the movie, these younger people, as the hero characters, because that's the audience that they are trying to reach out to and keep. Like, they're not trying to the people that are the people that are my age, the people that are in their like early 40s playing D&D, they don't have to work to keep us. They already have us.
No. Well, you got to imagine they're trying to get more people into D&D with this.
No, of course.
Yeah.
Of course, but it only makes sense looking at the names of the cast and the younger members of the cast that they picked, and the diverse nature of those cast members.
And I would
I
would love to see it. Okay.
No, I'm saying that's my call. They're going to make that diverse young cast is going to be the hero characters. That's who they're going to focus that time and story energy on.
Okay.
And Rodriguez and Pine and Hugh Grant, like, I feel like those three. I mean, Hugh Grant may be the bad guy. Who knows?
That feels like that to me. Damian, any predictions?
I'd love to see Chris Pine be the bad guy.
Kind of the more we talk about it, thinking about it and what the cast has so far, is there's got to be something that's kind of setting them on this adventure path, and kind of listening to what Michael's saying about this is that those could be kind of the like quest giver types for this too. That they're the people that are in the city that have conscripted out this band of probably thieves at this point, given the title.
Oh. I'm gonna go another on clip here. Michelle Rodriguez is gonna be the leader of the Thieves Guild.
Okay.
I think that's a
right. Somebody write that down. Tip.
I think
what
that
are you in
falls
the chat?
right into. I think that falls right into her
wheelhouse.
Her wheelhouse for sure.
Okay, Damian, what other predictions that you got?
Sorry, Damian, I interrupted.
Oh, it's fine. I'm just like kind of thinking back to the title that we have now, is especially with you tying it to probably the younger cast being the main focus, as I could see that, yeah, it's these plucky young, Thieves Guild members that are set up on doing something. There's almost a part of it that's got me wondering, it would be so off the wall to do it, but it'd be really entertaining to find out that this is essentially a fantasy heist movie.
Oh, for sure. I would love to see that. I think that'd be great. I think that's a wonderful thing to base a D&D movie around, honestly.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, you have a dungeon, and there's a
The
dragon
problem
at the
is
end.
that was also kind of the story in the first one, the
Oh, really?
original D&D
Yes.
movie.
Also, Paramount, I want to see a gelatinous cube. Okay? The thing that I think, one of the things that I think the D&D movie didn't do last time is I want to see these are the 3 monsters I want to see. All right? Listen up, Paramount. I want to see a gelatinous cube.
Gelatinous cube, you said,
Okay? I want to see a bloody beholder.
and a mind flayer.
No, because I think we can get even more fun with it. I want to see a mimic.
Okay.
I think there's no way they make this movie this time and they don't include a mimic.
Okay? They had none of those monsters in the last movie. I want to see those.
They had almost no monsters in the last movie.
Right. Okay. Let's get on this, Paramount. Moving along.
Definitely expect
I also
more.
from a D&D player standpoint, there's got to be at least one like goblin or kobold NPC or like character that accompanies the party or that they befriend and drag along with them.
Oh,
Not NPC, the enemy that they were like, we're keeping this one. This
Yep.
one is
Yep.
now our friend.
yep.
Yep.
Let's do it. Moving along. So we talked about obviously D&D and tabletop RPGs in movies and TV. Obviously, our primary means besides playing the game of consuming this these days is actual play podcasts and actual play streams, which obviously the 3 of us have considerable amounts of experience doing. For everybody who forgot, Michael is part of the longest running Star Wars actual play podcast anywhere. And Damian, tell us more about your project.
I'll say proof pending on that. Proof pending.
Proof pending. Damian, tell everybody about the one that you do and how, because you've been doing yours for quite a while now too.
Yeah.
We've been running about 5 years now. I am the dungeon master, editor, and producer for Adventures in Aurelia, which is a homebrew 5th edition actual play podcast that is all recorded with me and my main group of friends, recorded in my living room, right over that way.
And also, you have a primarily woman cast.
Yes, we are made up of, there's myself and my wife, who back when we formed the group brought in 2 of her coworkers, that are both female as well, and then one of those coworkers brought on her fiance. So our group is actually 2 guys and 3 girls.
Which is great, by the way. More representation in our podcasts, so that's always a good thing. Okay. What has been so obviously we get the big elephants in the room of CR and things like that. You both have been running this for a while. I've been doing IDENTECO streams / podcasts for I'm gonna go 2.5 years now ish. Solid, and then obviously one shots and things like that on various podcasts before that. So my question is twofold. One, how did your stuff start developing? And 2, with the big ones, it's weird to me with this medium because there seems to be, you are either ginormous or you are doing this out of just the joy of your heart, right? It's been very difficult. Like, you can find mid-level YouTubers, right? I know a bunch of them who, they're not rich, but they make, they basically make enough money to support themselves and live a, roughly middle-class or upper middle-class lifestyle. I don't see that with tabletop actual plays. It's either you're huge like CR or you're not. Do you think there's room to achieve any level of that kind of success outside of you having a huge backing behind you?
Damian?
It's difficult because I know that it's been done to a more middling extent, not the CR levels, but it's not something you hear of often. Specifically, one of the shows that I follow, the Glass Cannon podcast,
Mm-hmm.
back when their numbers were public, was, I believe, the top earning tabletop actual play on Patreon.
Mm-hmm.
I believe they now have 4 members of their show are full-time employees of their network,
Okay.
living in New York. And like, at least at the time, they were making the low 7 figures a year mark as their network. So definitely enough for those people to be
Live on,
making a
yeah.
living off of what they do. But that show's also, I think, 6 or 7 years old now.
Mhm.
So they were still not early, but relatively early in the space. And I struggle to think that a show starting now is going to be able to reach that level without a fairly heavy previous backing, something that's going to draw people in beyond, hey, we make a show that we put a lot of work into and we put a lot of production value into and we think is a really good show on its own. If you don't have something that's going to be like, there's probably tens of thousands of actual plays right now, so you need something that's going to put yours above everybody else's at this point.
Michael, your thoughts?
I mean, I echo Damian here a bit. There's, I think there's room, and I think there are examples. Like, think about the McElroys. You know, the McElroys with my brother, and me, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and of course the Adventure Zone. They've had a number of successful projects, and certainly they're doing well enough. There are groups like Glass Cannon. There are groups that are making a go of it, and they're making a living doing it. I think, much like any other format, or much like any other type of entertainment, when you start to see the numbers of podcasts, the numbers of actual plays jump the way that they have, the competition out there is the competition grows by leaps and bounds every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Redemption at our peaks, a few years ago, we were averaging, I think we were averaging between, at our peak, I think we were getting close to 3,500 to 4,000 downloads a month. Now, again, downloads aren't listens, and anybody who's done podcasting for any length of time will tell you that getting stats on actual listenerhood is difficult.
Impossible.
Yeah,
And
there's just too. There is no formal data set that is transferable between the different hosting groups.
The one upside, and that's the one upside I'll give Actual Play Live, right? And then shifting it to YouTube. And this is just for anybody who's listening to this who's like, I want to do this. The metrics you get from Twitch and from YouTube are good because they tell you not just who clicked on it, but how long they watched it for.
They're a walled garden, so they have the direct stats
Yep.
in
And
that ecosystem to be able to give it to you. Whereas in podcasting, our media hosts know that someone downloaded a file. They don't know what they did with that file after they downloaded it.
And I'm guilty of this, and I'm sure everybody is. I know I am subscribed to a bunch of podcasts that I do not have time to listen to. I wish I did.
Cough, Redemption, cough.
I wish I did. Actually, so I've been trying to catch your stuff on YouTube. So, by the way, everybody, youtube.com/ I think it's Redemption Podcast or the...
Yeah.
I
think it's just Redemption Podcast.
Yeah, so go check them out because they did get their custom URL. Thank you, everybody, and go subscribe to them. I like the fact that YouTube gives you watch time. I like that Twitch tells me not just how many people clicked on it, but how many people stayed. The only metric that I frustrates me from Twitch is actually the live viewer count is wonky because I've been in mod view when we've been doing things where I can count the number of people in the actively in watching the stream, and until they're in there for a certain period of time or interact a certain amount, Twitch won't count it.
Yeah, Twitch's live numbers can be very interesting. I don't do our podcast stuff live, but I stream with my group of friends, and it's like, I was in my channel. How do my metrics say that there were 0.2 viewers the entire stream when I was there the whole time?
Yeah, it's wonky. It gets a little wonky.
You know, and my understanding too is that, like, for example, Twitch doesn't count the view if the person has the stream muted.
Yeah, so the trick is apparently if you mute the tab, Twitch can't tell.
No, I'm just saying that,
Yeah,
you know, so
it's
somebody could
true.
be watching the show, but you won't see them as a viewer because they might have you muted.
That is true. If you mute the bar, that's my understanding, is they turn it off. YouTube's got certain
I need
thing.
like 2 minutes.
What's that?
I need like 2 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
I just knocked on the door.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
This is a casual podcast.
We'll vamp.
We'll vamp.
Man, that Damian.
Again, sorry we were late tonight, folks. We have had I don't know what happened tonight. Like, Michael and Damian were on with me like while I was trying to work it, and like apparently I sounded like a terrible robot the entire time. My video to them was coming across like I was doing I don't know what's happening. I watch my metrics as we do the stream. My CPU's running a little harder than it normally does, which is weird.
Okay, he's back. You can stop talking about it.
Yeah, exactly. So, again, thank you, everybody, for being patient with us. We were running a little late tonight. It got a little wonky, which is also why my thing's a square. Because for some reason, OBS defaults my webcam to 4:3 in OBS if I shoot it direct, whereas if I go anywhere else, it's 16:9. Why? No one knows. This is just how these things work. It's super wonky. I miss Mallo and his production genius. Okay? He is a much better producer than I am. I'm like a monkey banging two pots together when I do producing on my own. Okay? Like, I'm okay, but I don't have Mallo's experience. So, y'all Discord DM Mallo and tell him to come back. Because that, dude, it's killing me. Anyway, so back to
outside
action
of Alex's technical issues.
Yes. I'm curious to know because I actually haven't done a whole lot. Michael, you've done both, where you've done stream now and you've done podcast. And Damian, you've got a lot of experience with podcast. And I know Damian has told me many of the times about how much of a stickler he is in his editing process. Like, very careful, right?
It's meticulous on my end.
And I don't blame. Like, here's the thing:
aware that I overproduce.
Good production values are worth it. Michael, I'm curious from your perspective, what's easier and harder, better, worse about both platforms?
I just lost your audio.
Wait, can you hear?
I just lost your audio. Can you repeat one more time, Alex?
I said, since you've done both, what do you think is better, worse, easier, harder for each of the different platforms? Doing it podcast style versus live, like we do Chaos Inc.
Well, I think the easiest comparison to make and the most obvious one is live, right? If you're doing a podcast, you're basically fixing everything in post. You can fix everything in post, right? If you're doing a podcast, if you're recording your sessions, you can do something. You can go through an RP session or go through an action scene. You're like, you know what? I'm not quite sure I like that. Let's redo that, or let's recut that, or let's retake that. You can't do that live. You certainly there's no. I guess you could, but it certainly interrupts the viewing process, the entertainment process, right? It's obvious. It's much more difficult to layer and manage sound and audio and effects in a live production versus a recorded production, an edited production.
As we've seen when I've messed up the sound up and downs when we get started on stream.
but I mean, like, we have the luxury of having a producer typically that's available to assist with those things in the back end, so that as players and performers, and as the game master, we don't have to worry about those things, right? Um, and that's I think the biggest catch between live and podcast is that live stream, it's you get the energy of a live performance, right? You get the energy of you're being watched by one person, 10 people, 100 people, and there's an energy that comes out of a live performance like that,
Mm-hmm.
that even on a stream is obvious, versus playing around a table. When you're playing around a table, even if you're playing for a production, you're still playing for the people around the table that you're playing with, so it's a different vibe, it's a different feel. Um, and in both cases, you have to remain cognizant of the fact that you are performing. um, it's easier when you're in a live performance, because again, you've got the camera on you, you've got people watching via the
Mm-hmm.
the stream stats, so that somebody is watching you do the thing that you're doing. When you're putting together a show, putting together a podcast, and Damien, you're more than well aware of this, I'm sure you feel this too. You can put together your episode, you can spend 8 hours, 6 hours editing, and you put that thing out in the wild, and you're like, I hope somebody downloads it.
Yeah. It's been
Uh,
a like long-term internal joke for me is I produce Adventures in Aurelia for Ghosts because according to the stats that I get, somewhere between 35 and 60 people download the episodes. I hear from nobody.
yeah. And and that's the trick, right?
Oh,
Like,
yeah, we could.
in the chat here, for example, we have people that interact with us. We know that people are watching, not just because the numbers say they're watching, but we actually have people that are saying, hey, I'm watching you do the thing, here's a comment, or here's my opinion of this thing that you're doing right now. um, Podcasts, and again, to build on what Damien said, podcasts, like, if you get people that give you feedback, even positive or negative, like, it is a literal crapshoot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
You really don't know.
you're
You don't
firing it
know
off
if you're
out
going to
into the
get
internet
anybody.
and
So
just
that's
Yeah,
hoping.
okay. So that to me kind of is the contrast. There is the podcast. You could fix stuff in post. You could do a lot of stuff with your production values, and you don't have that pressure of being live. But with live, at least you know what's happening, like in the moment. Like I can look at Twitch right now, and I know that according to Twitch, and again, I don't have my mod view up right now. According to Twitch, there's at least 7 people watching us right now. So I can tell you that. That's what Twitch is telling me. Whereas podcasts, you don't get that immediate feedback.
And I'd like to just shout a thanks to BitPlayer for confirming that BitPlayer is indeed watching.
Thank you, BitPlayer, and we love you. And BitPlayer, I think gifted out 5 subs on Monday. And I can't call you out in the middle of the Chaos Inc. game, but please know I do see that, and I appreciate it. I appreciate all of our followers and subscribers. You got us to affiliate rather quickly.
Just as a note, I think it happened earlier when Damien had stepped away, but I think Gian Willis 35 also became a follower of the channel, so thank you for that.
Oh, thank you very much. We do love new followers, and we love new subs.
I saw Jervinator in there as well.
Nice. What was your processes? Like, I know what Mallo and I's were, and I think we've talked about it on the channel before. But like, Damien, what caused you to start Adventures in Aurelia?
I decided to start it actually because I was listening to actual plays myself.
Okay.
I got into playing tabletop RPGs actually really late. Like, I was in my early 20s when I first played Pathfinder. And that was all because the friend group that I was playing Magic with had a schedule change, and it was like, so by the way, Magic Night can't be Magic Night anymore. It's going to be Pathfinder Night, and you're welcome to join us. But that's what we're going to be doing. I'm like, I don't know what Pathfinder is. Like, oh, it's like D&D. It's like, oh, I'm aware of what D&D is. I've never played it or anything. So they brought me into it, introduced me to a couple actual plays to kind of like, here's what it's sort of like. And then I discovered some on my own. The one that I really cite for being the inspiration behind starting a show myself was Dungeons and Randomness,
Okay.
and really what caused me to start my show was I was listening to their show. I was invested in it, wanted to see where things were going, invested in the story. And ultimately, when I started creating my own homebrew setting and forming up a group, it was a matter of I want other people to be able to feel the same about my show and the story I'm telling as I do about some of the shows that I'm listening to.
See, that's great. I love to see, love to see that stuff. Michael, I mean, obviously you've been doing Redemption for a long time.
Yeah.
Why did you all start Redemption? I'm curious.
So Redemption started as kind of similar. I mean, it's a very similar story to what Damian had said. We were gamers. We played games. We listened to actual play podcasts. Our biggest inspiration was at the time the One Shot Network's podcast campaign. So a number of us were listening to Campaign, and that had led us to want to play our own Star Wars game, like just around the table, right? We want to play Star Wars FFG. We want to play the Fantasy Flight. I always say Final Fantasy version, the Fantasy Flight version of.
We may as well
Star
call
Wars.
it that too. Screw it.
Right. So, the flip side is that one thing we realized when we came to the table to play, we all had the same criticism of Campaign. And that criticism was that the people on that show are very talented improv performers, and they're wonderful performers, and that show is a wonderful show. But we all felt that show was really that show was playing hard into the comedy and less into like the Star Wars-ness of Star Wars, like the feel of Star Wars.
Do you think, because I noticed that with a lot of, especially on Twitch is really bad about it. And I think it's actually bleeding into, and this is where I'm going to go on a little minute. I think it's bleeding into how players are playing now.
Oh, for sure.
There is so much, and it's a lot easier in a lot of ways to keep people engaged with comedy than with drama. Drama is super difficult, like especially like slow burn, like intrigue and politics. Like, believe me, that was the experiment we wanted with Chaos Inc. Because when we conceived of Chaos Inc., it was Scandal or Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, but in Identico, and that's really hard to keep people engaged with. It's really difficult. Whereas comedy, I think, is a little easier to be like, look, funny, ha ha ha. Which is why I think Marvel does it with all of their Marvel movies. That it's the one-liners. It's really easy to keep the pace moving.
It's also like mentally, it's easier on you to consume too.
I think so, but I also think that it's having a distinct impact in how players play. I think a lot of them listen to a lot of actual plays or watch these Twitch streams, especially newer players, and they really, when they get to the table, it turns into a comedy, right? Like, and specifically I've noticed this where, and Damian knows, so with our living campaign at the store, we've got 30-ish players, and they range in age. Our youngest one, he's 11, our youngest player. And he plays with his dad. But he comes to the living campaign. It's been multiple sessions. 11 years old. Our oldest one, I wouldn't guess any younger than his 60s. He's an older gentleman. Especially with the younger ones. It's a lot of that jokes, comedy, one-liner, kind of, for lack of a better term, silliness a little bit. Like, Damian, have you noticed that, Damian?
To an extent, but being one of the DMs for the living campaign, you also know that the style of my sessions tend to not feed into that too well, because
that's true.
With the multiple DMs we have, we're up to 4 or 5 now.
Yeah,
I have become the de facto intrigue, political role play DM.
Yes, but at times they've derailed a few of those with screw it.
They've definitely made some choices there, but due
Very,
to
very, very politically correct way of putting that, Damian. I appreciate that.
Look,
In case any of them are watching,
I love our players, and they all know it. I love them, all of them, to death. But there are times where it's like they're just like this. I will use last night as an example. Chad had a thing planned, right? Who's one of our DMs, and he came over to me about an hour into his session. He's like, "They're not going to do that today. They're just." I had my thing prepped, and they went that way, and they decided they wanted wyvern eggs and griffins, and so that's where they went. You know, like it's and again, I love them all to death, but they go random places. Anyway, sorry, Damian, you were saying you have become the political intrigue one.
yes, definitely. So it's definitely a little harder for that to come up in them, but I was kind of getting to the point that because of how some of the players end up joining our sessions and how we don't necessarily know where a lot of them come from when they're joining us, is I don't know how much of that comes from outside influence through other productions versus just a difference in age and maturity levels, or just personality differences too.
Well, and I'm also basing this on some other evidence, on some stuff, because obviously we've all heard about this. Well, actually, I'm gonna ask. Y'all have heard the thing that's been termed the Matt Mercer effect, right?
yeah,
Of course.
familiar.
And so that's the other thing that I use as kind of evidence that, again, a lot of these young people, when they're coming to it through CR or through these other actual plays, and that becomes the expectation coming in, you know, and that's the style. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And again, like, who brought up Vox Machina earlier today? Like, Vox Machina it's supposed to be funny.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's, you know.
Well, I think Damien mentioned it earlier though, and I think it bears repeating that comedy from a personal, like from a getting to the table and playing standpoint, and from a listener standpoint, right? From someone watching a stream or is consuming a stream or consuming a podcast, comedy requires almost no emotional commitment from the listener or from the viewer. It also requires almost no emotional commitment from the player. So it's easier to come to a table that you are necessarily unfamiliar with and be funny or to play funny than to come to a table full of people that you may not be familiar with and try to play out serious emotional connections or serious dramatic situations than it is to sit down and make a character that, you know, cracks farts and swings a battle axe. I mean,
well, and
you know,
I would say we
some of it might be exposure, but some of it just simply might be that comedy is an easy gateway to get, you know, to get interaction from people and to as you said, to keep people, right?
Yeah, and
it requires from a viewer, it requires no emotional commitment from you. Like, you don't have to like stop what you're doing to listen to the show because something that is happening is so intense that it's drawing you away from the thing that you're trying to do.
Yeah. Oh no, for sure. And now here's the thing. I will say, with 30 plus players, and they've all had to play with various players across the thing. In fact, the players are starting to lose track of who they've played with. A few of them. I will say there is an emotional connection where some of them have started forming those. Like, have you noticed that as well, Damian, where they've started forming those connections?
Oh, definitely, especially for the longer term players, the people. I mean, because the Living campaign started about 4 months ago now, so
beginning of January. Yep.
Yeah, so we've had some people at this point that have been. I mean, some of them have been to 30 sessions almost. If you're really, like, you know, having 2 a week.
Pretty close.
And so yeah, some of those players that especially have been regular and then ending up in groups with the same sets of people more frequently have definitely started to form bonds and personal connections with their fellow players, and through that, the other characters that are at the table with them.
Yep. Uh, and I think it's great. And by the way, we run both living campaigns. So we do D&D. We also, by the way, we have an Identico living campaign, which has also had impacts on our friends in Chaos Inc., hasn't it, Michael? Yes.
Certainly has. Certainly has, Alex.
So we run the 2 living campaigns. I love these living campaigns. By the way, I broke down to the players in our D&D one last night. They were like, this is the chapter 1. I'm like, no. You're in the prologue. And a few of them looked at me like, this was just the prologue? And I was like, And they were like, crap. So, that's all
They
great.
should consider themselves lucky. Our prologue has been building for about 4 years now.
Yeah. All right. So, anything else on the D&D topics? Other than that, we're going to move on to quick hits real fast. Before we end, maybe we'll rile up the chat here in a minute. So, first on the list of quick hits this week, Elon Musk bought Twitter.
Hey, what do you know? A horrible billionaire is buying a company from a bunch of other horrible millionaires that sit on a board. What's different?
Well, it will no longer be publicly traded, so you will not be able to buy stock in Twitter anymore. He is taking it private. The current plan that's been filed with the SEC is he will take it private. Now, what's interesting is that he may have already violated the terms of the agreement, because in the agreement that was filed with the SEC, he cannot tweet disparaging things at Twitter, and he has spent most of today tweeting disparaging things at Twitter.
When has that ever stopped Musk?
It's not that, but at this point, if he's actually trying to acquire it, giving them any excuse to get out of the deal seems kind of dumb.
Unless he wants to do that.
You know, I hadn't thought about it. That he could place the blame on them.
Well,
It's one of those things, as you said, as Michael said, a billionaire buying out a bunch of millionaires, and I don't think that a lot of the things he's done have made the most sense to someone down at my level.
Yeah, it's really all speculation for most people at this point anyway, as far as the reasons for what he's going to do. He has said some things, but then, there's so many articles and so many think pieces out there right now. No one has the real story, really, as far as what's happening internally. No one's really,
I'm
other
only
than,
basing off the SEC, the filings that they made for the SEC.
Yeah.
Um,
No, but I'm just saying, there was a piece today about, here's why Elon's probably going to take the deal. And, again, the article is all speculation. It's all editorializing at this point. There's really no one has,
but that's what
almost no one has any real fact.
That's what we're here to do, is editorialize.
Oh, God.
We wrote a cyberpunk game. And again, to bring it back to Identico, this is the point we were making with a lot of the corporations that we wrote. And again, if you watch Chaos Inc., this is, I think, and Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, some of the struggles that the players have had is there's no good guy. I feel like, especially Steph and Kaylee, they keep looking for who's the good guys here, and there are no good guys in this situation.
Mm-hmm. And I think Caleb and I have embraced that. We are embracing the fact that, there are no good guys. We are not the good guys. We are not the White Knights. We're not the White Hats riding in to save the day. We're acting in corporate interests just like everybody else is. Now,
I will say this. In the tabletop RPG space, to bring this around too, I have not seen a lot of I've seen a lot of people being like, look, I'm not abandoning the platform. This is my primary way. Uh-oh, we lost Damian. Give me 1 second. He got disconnected.
What would you do?
I don't know. That's so weird. Oh, nope.
Alex.
Damian's back. Damian will be back. Give him a second. He muted, but he is popping back in. So we're going to check on this in a second. Give Damian a minute. But I've noticed a lot of people basically saying, I'm not abandoning the platform. Yeah, we all know Elon's an ass, right? But this is the primary way of reaching audience and stuff like that. I see that with a lot of journalists and a lot of people like that. Like, are you abandoning the Twitters now, Michael?
No. I will say this. Most of my primary interaction with people in the community happens within Discords now. Like for me, so
Do you
for
think
me,
that's
Twitter,
the future
Twitter
of
is,
the thing? Is Discord for tabletop?
I mean, I just for offhandedness, I don't think that that's the future of the thing. To me, Discord isn't really social media. Discord is a throwback to the old bulletin board systems of the early 80s,
It
right?
really is.
Like,
and you and I've had
that's what
this
it is.
conversation. You and I have had this conversation off stream before about the old BBS systems.
Mhm.
What about you? Oh, hey, we got another follower. Dapper Penguin, thank you for following. I appreciate it
Yes,
very,
thank
very
you.
much. Damian, are you going to abandon the Twitters now that Elon has bought? Because what I was just saying is most of the people I see in the TTRPG space who are fairly big names are like, look, I'm not abandoning the platform. Yeah, Elon's a jerk, but this is kind of the primary platform for tabletop RPGs right now as far as getting your name out there, like interacting and finding out about projects.
Well, so my first kind of response comment to that is the fact that I'm already terrible about being on social media. So, it you'd have to first say that I was really on Twitter to begin with. Ironically, I've been trying to be better about that before, like in the last week or so before he finished all of this. But that's mostly because in order to grow in the tabletop space at this point, you kind of have to be on Twitter and you have to engage with people. And so in trying to push for more growth for my own project, I've been trying to be more active. And no, him buying Twitter isn't going to immediately cause me to run away, but I also tend not to be knee jerky like that. And it's like, well, we'll see what he does first, because he hasn't really laid out much of a plan. Like, I know the main thing he's saying is it's all about free speech stuff, but I haven't heard any like actionable what he's gonna do for that.
So,
and if it's even going to affect me in the tabletop circle, because I try to keep my Twitter pruned really small into that space.
And so that I find is the difficulty, is that the minute you venture out bigger into the tabletop space, you are going to run into those people. And we all know who we're talking about within the community. And that's just kind of, unfortunately, the nature of the beast. If you're trying to promote projects, is you end up wandering accidentally into spaces that you don't want to be in, and you have to prune some more. I think Elon's going to make some initial quick changes. I think we'll see an edit button.
Edit button.
Yep, I think we're gonna see some real fast, like quick hit changes. There's that. As part of this, the White House and the Senate, in a rare moment of bipartisanship, they're talking about doing something with Section 230 again. I invite them to do so.
Got to regulate big tech.
The good luck. Repeal Section 230 and see what happens. You think that they're clamping down now? Wait till you make Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube liable for what people say on their platforms. Yep. You won't be able to post a tweet until it's reviewed by a human, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you just won't, like, there's that. Next quick hit. So Florida did finish doing what we talked about last week. Namely, they repealed Disney's special district in Florida. I'm sure the lawsuit is incoming. I just don't know who it's going to be from. It actually may be from the two cities that border Disney World, because they're about to get saddled with over $1 billion worth of debt.
Yeah. I was about to say, congratulations, Disney, because whatever plan that they had to anger someone enough to get this tax status taken away cleared $1 billion of debt off of their books. So good for them.
Again, there's no good guys here.
Yeah, no. Bad for the city. Bad for the two cities involved, certainly, and the people that live in those cities that have to take that burden. And I saw, I believe it was another write-up I saw on, funny enough, Twitter, and it mentioned that this is actually basically legislation should basically be called the No Lawyer Left Behind Act
Yeah, that's very true.
because there are going to be so many lawsuits coming out of this
Oh, it's gonna
that
get
it's
gonna
going to
get
be
dumb.
the courts are going to be jammed for years.
Oh yeah. Damien,
And at the end of the day, the legislation that they wrote also has basically a reconstitution clause in it. So at any time they can reestablish the
Never mind. Put it back.
yep.
yeah they can reestablish it with no penalty.
Yep.
So it's clearly a big like middle finger to Disney that of course no one seems to have thought all the way through. Strangely enough.
Hey, Damien, will you sign my petition to sell Florida to Cuba? I think we should just get rid of Florida.
You broke up for me, so I just heard Cuba.
I said I'm starting a petition so we can sell Florida to Cuba. Did I break up again? See, let's go back to the tech issue.
Not that time.
Yeah,
I saw that a judge in Texas apparently offered Disney to move there.
Oh,
so
there you
yeah,
go.
if between the two worst possible states in the union, yeah, let's put Disney in one of those. Sorry, Texans,
What are we gonna
your
do?
state sucks.
What are we gonna do? I
Isn't
would.
that why it's walled off in Identico?
It is walled off in Identico, and there was a reason for that. We made them a theocracy for a reason because they're, well, Texas. Anyway, thank you all for joining us tonight. My computer's starting to be a little wonky, so we're gonna sign out of here before it decides to explode on my desk. But before we go, Damian, tell everybody in the chat where they can find you, where they should subscribe to you.
You can find us at adventuresinaurelia.com. That is ERYLIA. And if you look up Adventures in Aurelia in pretty much any of your podcast apps, then you should be able to find us.
And Michael just posted it in the chat.
The logo looks a little something like that.
See, that's what we do. And what about on social medias? Can they find you? Can they find you on Twitter to follow you?
So the show is at Aurelia Pod because Adventures in Aurelia is too long for Twitter. And if you're interested in finding me, even though I don't really post anything myself, I'm at Damian the DM because that has become my moniker everywhere on the internet at this point.
And also, if you would like to meet Damian or play in one of Damian's games, in fact, next Tuesday is Damian's night to be the primary DM at Gamers Heaven Seattle. Damian was the first DM to join our crazy living campaign concept, and I appreciate how much time and effort he has put into it. I don't know what Michael's laughing at.
Oh my god. No. What I'm laughing at is that yeah, thank you, Damian, because it's basically, and to us and to the listeners, to the viewers out there, it sounds like you're slipping into the Micro Machine Man from the 80s commercials.
I'm curious if they do hear it on.
I really hope they do because it's hilarious. Because literally, it sounds like all of a sudden you're going like this for no reason at all, and you're talking, and nobody really knows what you're saying.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it goes to normal, and then it kicks back into Micro Machine voice again. It's awesome.
And what's funny is we dropped down to 4 frames per second there. Go.
But yes, I'm running games every other Tuesday at Gamers Heaven Seattle North, and as we kind of talked about earlier, I tend to be the more political intrigue DM. So if that's the kind of thing you're interested in and you're in the area, then come join my table.
Yes, please come join the table. Michael, where can we find you?
No touching.
No touching. Michael, where can we find you?
You can find me. Yeah, no touching. No touching. You can find me at Redemption Pod, redemptionpodcast.com. That's the Star Wars podcast, the aforementioned Star Wars podcast. You can also find me on social media at LoserMLW. You can see me here on Mondays with Identico. You can hear me on Tubular Teens with Titans, which is a Power Rangers inspired audio drama. That's Tubular Teens with Titans. I play the villain, Harbinger, and I get to chew a lot of scenery, and it's a lot of fun.
And as always, I am Alex the Humanoid. We will be back next Wednesday with another episode of Identical After Dark, where we will talk all kinds of stuff. And in a week and a half, the Monday after that, we will be doing the season 1 finale of Chaos Inc. It will be a extra special long episode. So please come join us for the season finale of Chaos Inc. If you'd like to catch up on any of our previous episodes, not just Chaos Inc., but Angel City Stories, and a really fun one-shot we did with Michael and some of the other folks back in the day called that relates to what's going on down in Texas. You can also find that there, as well as all of our back episodes of Identico After Dark, youtube.com/Identico. Everybody, we appreciate you. We love you. Thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.